In this section we're going to look at specification development in ComplyPro. From our home screen here I can see my specification flow down the left hand side. In this example I've got a set of sponsor requirements or client requirements. These then feed down into an SRS or system requirement specification, and that SRS then feeds down into several design packages of requirements. So that's my flow. Each one at the level below is intended to satisfy the level above. So my sponsor requirement set is fully satisfied by my SRS, and the content of my design packages fully satisfies my system requirement specification. So I've only got 3 levels in this example, but there can be as many levels as required in ComplyPro in your specification development. There's no restriction here. It's just setting up copies of each level in the system, some places for those documents to be kept, or those ComplyPro virtual documents to be kept and managed, and then the links between them. Okay, if I go into my sponsor requirement specification first, simply click through to that, and I can see here's my user requirement or sponsor requirement specification. I'll view this in a above-below view. So I've got lots of information and lots of stored attributes, we call them, against the statemented requirement and information text. You can see that where this sponsor requirement set has been brought in and statementized, if you like, you can see that some of these have been termed as or deemed headings in the category here. Some are just put through as information, and then those that are requirements have been specified as requirements. The purpose of that is so that the system knows that requirements have to be demonstrated as how they're going to be satisfied. So it needs to know which of the statements are requirements for onward traceability and flow through the system. Headings and information are for the benefit of the user who's working on this document, or also a means of interpreting these requirements better. It's also then possible to categorize requirements via a set of categories, completely customizable. Here's some that are well, as an example. So if it's a commercial requirement, then you can specify that. So let's follow this requirement through and have a look at some of the other fields. As we scroll along, we can see here that we've got a childless requirement flag. So all that cares about is where the requirement type has been set as requirement. So for example, where it's heading here, there is no child ID, i.e. there is no child SRS item linked below this particular line item on this view, but it's not bothered about that because it's deemed as being a heading. It wouldn't even be bothered about it if it was a piece of information, even though in this case there is an SRS item beneath this bit of information. But it wouldn't mind if there wasn't, because it's only a bit of information and it's not deemed a requirement. If, however, there was a requirement without a child SRS item linked beneath it, scroll down, okay, and we don't have any in this view. I could impose a filter on here to see childless requirement, and I could look for I happen to know what this says, filter, and actually there is one. See, further down in the list I wouldn't have spotted that, but there is a requirement with no child, and that's because the requirement type was flagged as a requirement, but there is no child ID beneath it, so there's no SRS item linked up to this sponsor requirement. So it's flagging it as we've got a requirement here and it has no child beneath it. So initially, if you were using the system to develop a specification, an SRS specification beneath the sponsor requirements that have been provided, then of course all of the requirements you tagged wouldn't have would have that flag, and gradually you would eliminate those by completing the designs at the level below. So that's what the childless requirement flag is supposed to show you. We've then got a separate section explaining the change process, but in essence where a change has been proposed or is currently in process against one of or another of these statements or requirements, then you can see that along with the current change status in the along with the requirement information itself. I can also click on the linked changes, so if I want to look at the change 1 for example, then if I click on this row I can see the full detail about this change and what it was all about below, and indeed if there was more than one change associated with this, then that would be shown here and also then shown as multiple rows down at the bottom here. See the change management section for further information there. Then we can see these blue links for the child IDs. So these are the SRS items that are directly linked beneath this particular sponsor requirement. So if I click on the Children tab, I can see by clicking on the row at the top the children which are which the children that fall below the item that you've selected or the row that you've selected at the top. So I can see that there's 2 SRS items living below this particular sponsor requirement, and indeed on the children front here they are. If I want to go through, lastly the source document and the source changed, if you've linked a requirement or any one of these statements and populated the source document for where this sponsor requirement has come from, then that external document, which once again is another section that you've likely already seen, this external document will be flagged as being changed if a change has been detected in the external document source. Say for example there's a new set of sponsor requirements and this particular requirement may have changed if this source flag is present. So it's a notification to look further at that. Once again, look at the external documents section for some more further guidance on capabilities in this area. In order to go through to my SRS, then we can either go back through the home page where we initially looked, but I can also just simply click through by clicking on the blue link. It'll now bring my SRS into focus, and then it's got its own children and indeed its parents, because now this is the mid-level. The SRS has the sponsor requirements as parents, and it has the design requirements, the detailed design requirements as children. So we've got a parents and a children tab. So if I select this particular requirement, I can see here's its parent, and I can also see here's its children. Just like in the same way as we've looked at the flags for the parent for the childless requirement at the sponsor requirement stage, it's the same here. If an SRS item doesn't have any children, doesn't have any detailed design requirements at this point beneath it, then there will be a flag in here saying that it's a requirement but it doesn't have any children. And similarly, from a parentless point of view, if there's an SRS item in here that's not linked up to a parent sponsor requirement, it will flag that in the same way. See, here's a couple of examples as we scroll down of where that is the case. Okay, if I let me scroll along now. So you can see on here exactly the same field as before, pretty much, but the only difference being is that here we have both parents and children. So we have parent IDs and child IDs, so we can click through to its parent or click through to its child or children in the case of a many-to-many relationship. We're going to look at these last 3 columns very shortly in the next section, indeed under the verification, validation and suspect link section. So we'll skip over these for now, but do watch the next section for explanation around this process. So let me think about my detailed design items then, the third level of my specification development in this example. Let me go back to my home page. So we've looked at the SRS level and the sponsor requirement level, okay, and how they are linked together. Now we're actually going to look at the inside the design packages, and we're going to actually create a new design item here and link it back up. We could have obviously created new SRS items and linked it back up. The process is all the same, so if you can do one, you can do them all. So we'll just do one at this particular level as a demonstration. So if I go into my design packages, okay, this is created, opened up for me, especially if I click across this way, a set of metrics. We'll be explaining these metrics in detail in the verification and validation and suspect link section, but for now I'm just going to click through into one of these design packages. You will notice that the subcontractor has been selected on the right hand side here. Remember, I'm logged in as an admin, so I can actually do everything. If I was Mr. Subby2, then that's all they would see is the Subby2 row, and they would then only be able to create their designs to satisfy the SRS in their section. So I'm going to essentially be doing what Mr. Subby2 would do as the design consultant for the overhead wiring, but I'm obviously able to do this without logging in and out as different users because I've got administrative rights. So here we go, I'm inside my design package 2 for the overhead wiring now. I can create additional designs, detailed designs in here by right clicking, whichever point I want. It doesn't have to be at the bottom, but if I want to create one at the bottom, select the last item and insert my new design item after. Here it is, here's all detail. I'm going to specify this as a requirement. If I want, once again, I can categorize it if I wish to. My new requirement text goes in here, and you'll see in all these cases here I've created new requirements, but as yet haven't linked these up. Oh, excuse me, my voice has gone. Haven't linked these up to any parents as yet, so they're just raw design items with no parents, no SRS parents. Of course, the whole purpose here is to satisfy the level above, so there shouldn't be any design items that aren't satisfying the one way or another an SRS requirement. So if I scroll along, this will populate automatically on save, the last modified by and when. If there were any changes associated with these down the line, then they will fill out in these gaps, like we saw earlier for the sponsor requirements. If these design items are captured in any interfaces, which also explained in another section, then that will show in here, like it's showing for these items here. And look, here's the 3 change ones at the top here for the first one, so it shows them in an order with the current status of the change. And lastly, if I scroll along, then we can see several fields associated with the verification and validation and the evidence submission. So we will look at that in the next section for the verification, validation and suspect links. Light at the end here, where it does have a parent, then that will show you the blue link, so I can link back to that SRS parent. So if I select this row under the parents, I can see what the SRS parent would be. There are no parents to any of these, which is the reason why there's no links on the right hand side, and the reason why it's flagging that these are all requirements that do not have any parents. To prove the point, if this was a heading, something like that, it's not going to flag because it might be parentless, but it's not a requirement, so it doesn't bother about that. If it is a requirement, then it will be concerned about that. Okay, so there's my specification development, and I'm now going to finish off on this one just by showing you how an item can be deleted. So if the user has got the rights to do so, let's just say I've completely stuffed this requirement up, it's not even needed at all, I can delete this design item just like that. You obviously have to have the rights to be able to do that. Okay, thanks very much.